My childhood I had a lot of freedom in my childhood. My parents were quite alternative. They, having both been acupuncturists, they sort of had that alternative side to them. They were very philosophical and spiritual and wise, and I feel very grateful to have had that kind of passed on to me in the ways that they did. So yeah, growing up with a lot of freedom, I'm sure that has impacted me today, and even what I do and the way I work with the clay now. It's very playful, and so there's something that is kind of linking there between like your childhood self and the way that you interact with the material. I feel like I grew up in a time where you're really engaged with the people and environment around you, and in what feels like quite a natural way. I don't feel like I was too limited and restricted, and it's made me feel more open to the world around me and to my emotions as well. I think my mum would always tell us to tell someone how you feel. So if you're playing in the playground and somebody hurts your feelings or said something, and she would always say, tell them how it made you feel. And it's that kind of connection with the inside, which I feel like translates massively to the work that I make. It all kind of starts, from inside and projects its way outwards. So having grown up with my grandmother was a potter, my grandfather worked with clay as well, amongst other materials, stone, wood, metal, and my auntie as well, she also makes pottery, and having that kind of around me, I'm sure has influenced me to then try it out. I started pottery gradually through a sort of hand building, and really in my childhood years where I'd visit my grandparents and we would be given, me and my brothers would sit down and we'd be given some clay to work with, and we'd just sculpt little animals or like a character from an animation movie. And I remember my grandmother being there at one point showing me how to throw on the wheel. Maybe I was like 12 at that point. And so I'd done it, but it hadn't it almost didn't mean anything to me at that point. In school, I was always into the more arty subjects. I did art and photography A-level and still wasn't into ceramics then. And then something suddenly hit me. I was like, isn't it amazing that we're eating and drinking out of this ceramics that are made by our family? And then I was like, I have to try an evening class. So I did, and was around the time that I would have a gap year. And then after that, I basically just continued doing it. And yeah, here I am. 7 years later, it feels like it's still the beginning. An idea begins on the wheel. As much as you have all of the stuff leading up to it, the clay, whether you prepare the clay yourself, whether you dig it yourself, or whether you just buy it from a bag, that's essentially, that's the very beginning. Sometimes there's an idea that's already in my head, and then I've just got to kind of work through the challenges of, you know, how I get it from here to a physical form. And more now I'm trying to figure out or imagine how I want a piece to look from the moment I've put it on the wheel. I like to have some kind of idea or a goal of where I want this piece to end up. There are so many different elements to incorporate as well. So you've got the clay, and you've got the throwing. That's an opportunity to create the form that you're happy with and get it as close to how you want it as possible in that moment. You've got the trimming, you've got slip decoration, you've got texture, you've got glazing, firing, which clay body you use. There's so many different elements, and finding a way to tie them together in harmony that they're going to complement each other, that's the goal, really. In an age where industrialization and machines can replicate almost anything, they'll never truly be able to replicate handmade ceramics. And I feel like you can really tell the difference. So they're getting better, or it's almost the style now to replicate something that has got this imperfection, this handmade quality, but it's still manufactured by machines or industrial processes. But when you really look at good pots, you do notice the difference. You can absolutely tell. It's the energy of how something is made. You see it in the pot, and a bit of somebody else is sort of captured in that pot as well. If you look at some of the craftsmanship that's out there, you see the life, the joyfulness, the playfulness in those pots. That's something a machine can never replicate. The first part of the making process begins at the wheel. Pottery, ceramics, it's a very ancient craft. It dates back thousands of years. To think about those kind of moments where they were first discovering certain techniques, even just down to having a fire and then noticing something turn into ceramic after that fire. It's just like incredible to think about, and thinking about the kind of discovery of wood ash as a flux, as a essentially forming a glaze once it lands on the pots. It's really amazing to kind of to think about where it's all come from and how these processes have come into our lives now. And they've changed a lot and evolved and adapted, but it's also important to remember where your craft is kind of originating, where it's coming from, and to look back on pots and like study ancient pottery, and because they got so many things right back in the day, even if they were just building pots for function, the aesthetic of them, it's something that you don't get in the same way anymore. I think looking back on ancient pottery is important to do so, and just even if you just look and see what you can take away from it, it's having that connection to the craft and carrying it forward. And there can be a lot of risks, and pretty much anything can go wrong along the way. I suppose the risk factor is part of what makes the outcome rewarding in the end, is because anything can go wrong throughout any of the stages. So if you've got something that you've worked on and it's survived and seen it through to the end, and you're actually happy with the finished outcome, then that's a big achievement. So half the time the excitement comes from the unknown reality of the pottery process. Sometimes an idea really pays off, and a lot of the time it doesn't, but that means that when an idea does work, then it makes it really worth it. If something breaks or comes out ugly, you move on, you learn something, and you try again. I think in this day and age where technology is kind of advancing and taking over to some degree, in some way I feel like we're protected, because those technologies can never truly recreate what we're doing and capture the energy of what we're doing in the making. And sometimes I kind of hope that some of the old traditions will kind of work their way back into this modern world. It's got to a point where the results they don't give back in the same way that an atmospheric firing would. Too predictable, and to have that mystery of what's going to come out each time keeps people coming back for more. I think that there's going to be demand for people wanting those funky surfaces that only the ash of wood can bring, or the fluxiness of soda. It's a very solitude place, pottery. But at the same time, you kind of share the joy of it within the community. So it's kind of all about balance. For me, when I find a balance when it comes to teaching, and it's that kind of external social time to be with others and engage and community and to kind of share the craft and to be able to pass on my tips and tricks to my students. And yeah, it's just like, it's about finding that sort of balance. It's difficult to imagine in what ways advanced technology will kind of integrate its way into ceramics. You can see how the kind of world of ceramics has changed massively over the years, and that will keep on changing. And I feel like it's been up and coming for a few years as well. Lots of people wanting to try it out, and that gives room for who knows what sort of kind of creative expression individuals will have. It's been 7 years since I properly started working with clay on a more regular basis. It still feels like very much the beginnings, which, you know, is almost a relief, because I I feel like I've done so much. I've learned a lot, but there's still something in me searching for me in my work. So I feel like that's always been quite a significant part of finding my style. I would like to continue to keep incorporating these practices that I find are kind of meaningful to me. As long as I'm keeping that alive in my work, then I hope it will kind of translate into the future. And so long as that I'm doing that for myself, it means that I'm also able to share that with others, whether that's people who are buying my work or whether it's through teaching my students. I hope that people will keep bringing their sort of personal touch into whatever they're making and keep learn from as many people as you can as well, because everyone offers something different. You never know what tip or trick you're going to get from the next potter, what information that you might get from visiting a gallery. So yeah, keep it all fresh and yeah, just keep on making, I suppose.